Well, Brent, if I don't like surprises, whenever you're up there, you're always a surprise, and I love you dearly, buddy. So this morning I'm going to begin another little mini series of talks with you titled E Squared, Mobilizing Divine Energy to Transform Life. And that's a good title, right? E Squared, Mobilizing Divine Energy to Transform Life. And it's really a little bit of a continuation of the talks that the couple of talks I did on Star Wars, right? But before I go any further in this, just let me preface my remarks this morning with this commentary. There's this ongoing conversation in our culture at the moment. It's not going on in all churches, but it is ongoing in our culture about how we understand God in the world today. And so what I'm picking up on and what I'm exploring with you in these few weeks are some of the new ways in which our culture is beginning to think about God and to unpack God. And as I start to explore these, I don't know if they're new or emerging ideas about God, this does not mean that the more traditional ideas about God necessarily have to be ditched or thrown out like the baby with the bathwater. So I just want to reassure you about that right now. Every new kind of unfolding in terms of human understanding is always based on previous understanding. So trust that probably in this whole mix, if I were to say to you, I'm giving you the final word on God this morning, you would all just, oh, David, right? All of you have your own understandings, your own wisdom, your own insights, your own intuitions, right? It's all part of the mix. It's all part of the exploration. It's all part of the conversation. And I want to honor that at the same time that we explore these other kinds of ideas. Because ultimately, God is totally beyond our comprehension and our understanding. And any of us who say we've got the line on God that would be the height of arrogance. And so you need to think about this little series that I'm talking about as kind of a playful, creative exploration that we seek to delve more deeply into truth. But let's do it with a sense of humor. Let's do it with some fun. Let's do it with some curiosity. And don't take any of what I'm saying this morning as absolute truth, God's truth, the final word or any of that. But it is the exploration of what is unfolding in the world today. Is that a deal? Deal. Okay. So here's the nub of the matter. Okay. If God, as we have been talking about for a long time now, if God isn't an old man up in the sky with a long white beard, or for that matter, gals, an old crone up in the sky with long gray hair, if God isn't that being up there in the sky pulling strings, sort of maneuvering our lives, sometimes with compassion, but often rather seemingly arbitrarily as well. If that is not, or if that is the image of God that is slowly dissolving and disappearing in the world today, and if the image of God that is appearing in the world today, and the kind of new understanding of God that's appearing is that God is more like the Force in Star Wars, this kind of mysterious, invisible presence that is everywhere around us, in the spaces between us, permeates our very being, permeates space and time, gave rise to space and time, is everywhere here, everywhere imaginable. If that's a more accurate reflection and sort of image of God in the world today, how are we supposed to relate to that one? And this is the question. Like when God was the person up in the sky, well, there were all sorts. We know how to relate to other people, so we knew how to relate to that God. But if we're relating to God as energy and spirit and this invisible force, how do we relate to God in a new way as that kind of reality? So Pam Grout, this is the question that Pam Grout addressed in her book, E Squared, I always get the title wrong. E Squared, 9 practical do-it-yourself experiments to prove that thought creates reality. There's a mouthful for you, isn't it? You can see why I have a hard time getting that off my tongue. So she wrote this bestseller to address precisely that question I'm just talking about, is how do we kind of start to integrate this new understanding of God as force, as presence, as all these things into our lives in the world today. And the book's been a huge bestseller, and that's why I'm kind of chatting, because it's sort of contributing to this contemporary cultural conversation about God. So Pam has some suggestions, and she gives some practical kinds of experiments in the book to help us start practically trying to relate to God as force and spirit and presence and all those sorts of things. She tells a story. She tells a story about before the book was published and while she was still a young author. She says she fell in love with a chiropractor in someplace in Kansas, in the United States. And this chiropractor got a job working with Aboriginal people in Australia. And they had just been starting to get a relationship going, right? And she said to herself, how am I ever going to fall in love with this guy? How am I ever going to make anything happen with this guy if I'm here in Kansas and he's 10,683 miles away in Australia? But Pam, being a rather spiritual person, decided, I'm gonna put this out there. And she said, I didn't have any money. She said, I was a poor, starving artist and writer at that time, for goodness sake. She said, I certainly didn't have the $1,500. Anybody who looked at my bank account knew it was impossible for me just to get up and buy a ticket at that time to fly to Australia. So she said, I'll put it out to the universe. I'll put it out to the divine. I want this relationship to happen. And she says she really got into it, right? She started imagining and visualizing herself just swinging through the waves of Sydney off the beach and taking up a tan and heading out to restaurants in Sydney, just having a whale of a time, she says. And she says, lo and behold, she was having great fun with this, and she says, so help me God. Within a week's time, she got a phone call from the editor of Modern Bride magazine, for which she sometimes wrote. And the editor said, Pam, I know this is short notice, it's a last minute kind of thing, but we're doing a story on some kind of wedding shower process that's going on in Australia right now. We need a writer. So we know it's short notice, but we'll pay you extra. Would you be willing to take a flight to Australia and do a story for us? And Pam said, well, if you insist, I'd be glad to go. What Pam is suggesting in her book is that we are contained within, so that God isn't some being up in the sky pulling strings and orchestrating our lives. That when we pray to God, it's not like God says, okay, I'll voluntarily go along with this wish and I'll make sure that Pam has a flight to Australia. Rather, what Pam is suggesting, and kind of what the Force in Star Wars is suggesting, is that we are contained within a reality that responds to our thinking and our emotions and our deepest desires and wishes. So that's the kind of reality. And a lot of contemporary science and spirituality is kind of coming together today, suggesting, we know that God ultimately is a reality that we cannot possibly comprehend. But there are, according to quantum physics and modern science, this manifest world that we see is a manifestation of deeper underlying mysterious processes that are very kind of creative, very intuitive, totally invisible, but that it's this deeper underlying reality that gives birth to everything that goes on in the world. That passage that Brent shared with us earlier about the transfiguration of Jesus, it suggests that the disciples of Jesus in his presence experienced reality as something not so hard and fast and material, and that you needed to use bulldozers and shovels or whatever they had back in those days to maneuver it and make things happen, or that you needed to pray to some supernatural guy or girl in the sky to manipulate to make things happen. But that reality with Jesus was also like, you hear these stories about miracles and Jesus doing remarkable things, and in this story of the Transfiguration, Jesus is permeated and surrounded by light, and these couple of dudes show up, and it's Moses and Elijah, and they're having a conversation with Jesus. A lot of quantum physics suggests today that this whole material reality in which we exist may simply be some kind of a holographic projection of some deeper underlying reality. And when I think about that Transfiguration, Brent is just having a laugh. He's giggling over it. He just loves this stuff. So I just see Jesus on the mountain with his disciples, and all of a sudden the disciples see, it's like Jesus talking with Moses and Elijah. And I can just see this, it's like a holographic image of these persons. They're long dead, so all of a sudden they appear and they're having this conversation with Jesus, and it's just like you would see in a holographic kind of sort of scene from Star Wars, right? These three people talking in space, right? They're not physically present, but they are there having a conversation nonetheless. So this is what Pam's book and what Star Wars theology and what so much of our conversation in our society is saying today is the nature of God, that God ultimately is beyond totally our comprehension, but reality is characterized much more by qualities of spirit, immaterial. It's kind of like taking, to use a physical analogy, like you could take putty and mold it. Reality is much more plastic. It's much more, you can manipulate it, you can do things with it because it participates in the quality of energy and spirit and light, much more so than is actually characterized by hard and fast material matter stuff that you have to use physical brute force to manipulate, right? And what Pam is saying in her book, if the world in which we live is much more material and spiritual and permeated by spirit and actually capable of being transformed by our thoughts and our emotions, well, that's a whole different reality. And it is that reality because God's intelligence and wisdom and spirit permeates all of this all the time. So Pam suggests, she says, now, in her book, it's high time that people in our society today started to relate to God in this kind of way, as this kind of force and energy and spirit, not as the old guy or the old gal up in the sky, as this kind of reality. And she says, I want to give you 9 experiments to prove, I want to move beyond faith to prove that reality, when we relate to reality and when we're trying to affect change in our lives, it's not about asking him up in the sky to pull the strings, what we call the supernatural theistic intervention as God. It's about using our thoughts, our heartfelt emotions, to actually work with the spirit dimension that is inherent within the seemingly material world. And that when we work with that dimension, put out requests to it, lead our deepest desires, ask it to respond to us, that it can and sometimes does respond. Am I making this at all clear? So her first experiment is this. So I'm going to engage you in the next couple of weeks. I think some of the experiments are a little flaky, so that's why I'm not doing all 9 of them with you. But I'm going to do a couple of them with you, right? And just have fun with it, because this is what's going on in our world. This is what people are talking about. So I just want to have fun with this with you, right? So the first experiment is called the dude abides principle. The dude abides. I don't know how she came up with that. The dude is obviously the force. So the dude abides principle is always here, and it will respond to us, and we can relate to it. And she says, I want you to somehow find some proof in your life, because she says we so often think that this mysterious spirit force is so mysterious, so invisible, it's like, so we don't really believe in it. And what she's saying is, what I want you to do is to start to experiment with spirit, to really develop a trust that it's as real and as significant in our lives as anything material. So here's her Here's her first experiment for you. And you can choose to do this or not, but I'm going to invite you to do it this week, and we're just going to have some fun with it. This is your mission this week, if you should choose to accept it. Okay? Your mission is to give the dude, to give Spirit 48 hours to prove to you convincingly that it exists. Absolutely prove that it exists to you. So what she wants us to do, she wants us to put out that suggestion to Spirit. Spirit, I want you in some way to prove your existence in my life. And she believes it's possible. She says it's absolutely possible. And obviously, millions of people who have bought her book think it's possible as well. She says, I believe it's possible. And we've always said, do you believe in Spirit? But do we really believe in Spirit? She said, I want you to really check this out for a change, right? So she says, and the best way to test Spirit is to do this. Say to Spirit, internally, and we're going to do this in a minute. We're all going to participate in this if you so choose. We're going to put a request to Spirit within the next 48 hours to prove to us that it exists. Incontrovertibly prove to us that it exists. And the best way to ask Spirit to prove to us that it exists is to ask for some kind of blessing. Now, you might ask for something specific, but she suggests just ask for a blessing. A blessing that you wouldn't normally receive in the next 48 hours. Some kind of blessing that somehow will make it clear to you that something else was at work here. Something else was at work here. The idea being that, again, our heartfelt intentions, our thoughts, our emotional states interrelate with Spirit and invite a response from Spirit. So you get that distinction. That's not the old man up in the sky so much. It's working with the intelligence and with the fundamental nature of reality, interreacting with it, interrelating with it, and inviting it to respond and to shape our reality in certain ways. I have no idea if this will work. I have no idea. But I thought I'm going to engage in this experiment with you this morning. So here's what I'm going to ask you. I just did a wedding yesterday, and in my wedding, I have to do wedding vows, and people repeat after me. So here's what I'm going to invite you to do, okay? I'm going to invite you to repeat a little affirmation thing after me, okay? And we're going to invite Spirit to bless us individually and collectively in the next 48 hours. And next Sunday, we'll come back and we'll see what stories we have to tell. If there are any. I don't know. Terry, I'm going to ask you to put something up on Facebook around this. And so we'll have it on our Facebook site. And if things are happening for you, if they are happening for you, if they're not happening for you, you can still put it up on Facebook. But if they are happening, go to Facebook and let's make a little thing happen here. Let's see what happens, okay? Okay, so you ready for this? So I think in order to make this work, I should actually, you know that they say that thoughts and ideas are imprinted more deeply in our psyches when we do something really unusual or there's some kind of emotional component. So, if you're just sitting back in the pews, just sort of hanging out and repeating these words after me, it's not going to work. I think you have to stand up. And I sort of think that for those of you who are able, you should stand on one foot, or you should put one arm up in the air. Do something different. Make a funny face or something or other. So this is some way of really engaging this, because if you're just sort of drifting and just sort of hanging out, oh yeah, David's having us do something really stupid this morning, it's not going to work, right? So you need to do this in such a way. Or Terry's got her hands out like this, and that's a good one, right? That's actually a very receptive kind of pose. So if we put out our hands, we're inviting blessing. So here are the words I'm going to invite you to repeat after me, okay? I'll read them to you first, and then we'll do the repeat, okay? So, wonderful God, field of all potential, because that's what we're saying God is. God is this force field of potential. Wonderful God, field of potential, source of all that is. We invite you this morning to bless each of us individually and to bless our community collectively in the next 48 hours to reveal to us absolutely your presence in our lives. So be it. Amen. What do you think? Shall we check it out? It's just an experiment. We'll just have some fun with it, okay? So this is a repeat after me. Maybe put your arms out, or you put your hands together, or you put your arms out, however you want to do it. That's right, but make it different. Okay, repeat after me. Wonderful God. Field of all potential. Source of all that is. We invite you this morning to bless each of us individually and to bless our community collectively in the next 48 hours. To reveal to us absolutely your presence in our lives. So be it. Amen. Good for you. Now the thing is, you gotta be open to it. Skepticism, they say in quantum reality that the most minute kinds of qualities can impact the result, right? Very minute things. So what you need to do is really try to enter into this with a spirit of openness, with a spirit of receptivity, so that when you go to bed tonight, repeat it again. Wonderful God, bless me individually. Bless us collectively. Prove to me that you're real, okay? Let's do that, and do it in the morning when you get up, and when you're driving into work in the day. Keep affirming that. Look for it. Be open for it. Let's see what happens. What do you think? Okay, BUC? All right, awesome. Let's be seated. Good. And the Spirit in me honors the Spirit in all of you. Amen.
That the next thing up is a musical anthem. While people are gathering, I will point out that 100 years ago, Einstein came up with his theory of relativity. And at the time, it was an earth-shattering type of thought that matter, hard and strong, could be energy. Mathematics, that's energy, E equals m, mass or matter, c squared, the speed of light squared. So that was a real breakthrough in thinking. There's a mathematical, scientific element to it. And now we've journeyed 100 years further, and we have some of David's thoughts of today.
There was a man amongst us whom many of you will recall, Keith Thompson. He was our chair of council for a time and sang in Spirit Rising, and I would say he was one who lived that how do I relate to spirit? How do I relate to the human experience of spirit? So this is a song that Judy Farnell, our guitarist, she's sick today, so I'm going to do my best. She wrote this song, and the chorus is Keith's words. So you see, she wrote this little, for Keith Thompson and for his words, as they are found in the chorus. So here's how one man chose to live out David's call.
A seeker journeys on paths of the soul. Seeker travels on paths of the heart. Drawn ever closer to the beacon of light. Life becoming a true work of art. Seeker journeys intertwining with us. Seeker travels through laughter and tears, giving and working and serving with love, wisdom growing throughout the years. Connected to the source of great light, I intuitively know what is right. Connected to the source of great love, I fly and I rest like a dove. Connected to others I see.
Reflections of the source within me, connected to nature I find my right path, my right mind, connected I am. Seeker journeys while honing great skill. A seeker travels through night and through day. And when the time comes to go all alone, lovingly send him on his way. Connected to the source of great light, I intuitively know what is right. Connected to the source of great love, I fly and I rest like a dove. Connected to others I see, reflections of the source within me. Connected to nature I find my right path, my right mind, connected I am. Connected.